Today's video brings an important update, one that has sparked discussions among clergy, faithful, and observers alike. It concerns recent actions taken within the Vatican involving sacred artwork and a significant decision from the highest levels of church leadership. Before we begin, comment where you are watching from. Among the many developments under Pope Leo's leadership, one decision in particular has drawn significant attention. It concerns a series of sacred artworks created by a former Jesuit priest named Marko Rupnik. Rupnik was once a prominent figure in Catholic art, known for his mosaics and religious imagery used in important church spaces, including the official Vatican News website. His works were also featured in places of pilgrimage, such as the sanctuary of Aparecida in Brazil, where 4 large mosaics were planned for installation. However, in June 2025, the Vatican began quietly removing his digital artworks from its platforms. The removal was not coincidental. It followed a decision made by Pope Leo XIV in collaboration with several cardinals. It marked a clear response to serious concerns raised about Rupnik's conduct and legacy. Rupnik had been previously expelled from the Society of Jesus in 2023 after failing to comply with church authorities. He also faced multiple accusations of psychological and spiritual abuse involving more than 24 individuals, many of them former religious sisters. These allegations, combined with his refusal to follow orders from his superiors, led to his dismissal from the clerical state. As a result, his presence in official church media is being systematically withdrawn. In addition to removing digital content, several of his physical mosaics are now being covered and are expected to be replaced. This includes work both in the Vatican and at major sanctuaries abroad. This decision reflects a broader effort by church leadership to uphold accountability, transparency, and a commitment to healing for those who have been harmed. Since his expulsion in June 2023, Marko Rupnik has no longer been recognized as a priest within the Roman Catholic Church. Despite this, many of his artistic contributions remained in place until now. For nearly 2 years, there had been growing calls within the church for the removal of his artwork, especially from prominent religious spaces and digital platforms. Bishops and cardinals had been urging action, citing both the gravity of the allegations and his defiance of ecclesiastical authority. When Pope Leo XIV assumed the papacy, one of his early decisions, made in collaboration with senior church leaders, was to act on these long-standing requests. The removal of Rupnik's mosaics and digital content was seen as necessary, not only to protect the dignity of the church's sacred spaces, but also to respect the pain of those affected by his alleged actions. These changes are now underway. Digital images that once featured his work have been taken down from the Vatican's official platforms. Mosaics at various locations, including those recently installed at the sanctuary of Aparecida, are under review and expected to be replaced by new works created by artists without ties to such controversies. This move is more than symbolic. It reflects the Church's ongoing commitment to justice, transparency, and the restoration of trust. While the canonical processes involving Rupnik are still ongoing, this visible step sends a strong message about the importance of integrity in both ministry and sacred art. Art has always played a central role in the life of the Catholic Church. From the frescoes of the Sistine Chapel to the stained glass of medieval cathedrals, sacred art is more than decoration. It is a visual form of theology. It teaches, inspires, and elevates the heart and mind toward the divine. Every mosaic, every painting, every sculpture within a church space is meant to reflect the holiness of God and the beauty of the gospel. That's why the decision to remove an artist's work is never taken lightly. It signals that something has broken, not just in terms of credibility, but in the relationship between art, the church, and the faithful. Marko Rupnik's mosaics were designed to be spiritual meditations. His work shaped the interior of chapels, adorned basilicas, and helped form the visual identity of Vatican media. For years, many viewed his art as sacred, but once the integrity of the artist came into question, so too did the appropriateness of his works remaining in holy spaces. This moment forces the Church to confront a difficult question. Can art remain sacred if the artist's actions violate the values the Church upholds? For many, the answer lies not in erasing the past, but in ensuring that what is displayed in churches reflects not only beauty but also truth. By choosing to remove Rupnik's work, the Church is taking a stand, not against artistic expression, but against scandal being sanctified by silence. As new artworks are commissioned to replace what has been taken down, a new chapter begins, one that prioritizes healing, integrity, and reverence for the sacred. These future creations will not only beautify churches, but also remind the faithful that holiness is not found in skill alone, but in the spirit that inspires it. Sacred art has always served as a bridge between the visible and the invisible. In Catholic tradition, it is never merely aesthetic, it is catechetical, liturgical, and spiritual. It helps the faithful contemplate eternal truths, entering into mystery not with words, but through color, form, and light. Throughout the centuries, the Church has employed art not only to teach, but also to lead souls into worship. Whether through icons, statues, or mosaics, each work contributes to the sacred atmosphere of the liturgy. That is why the removal of Marko Rupnik's works carries more weight than a simple curatorial decision. It is a symbolic act, representing a separation between what is sacred and what can no longer be spiritually trusted. Rupnik's mosaics were known for their bold style, combining traditional iconography with modern artistic elements. They appeared in chapels, sanctuaries, and even the Vatican's own media platforms. But art, no matter how technically impressive, cannot be separated from the integrity of its creator, especially when it is displayed in places of prayer. The controversy surrounding Rupnik is not just about scandal. It is about whether the sacred can coexist with the compromised. As allegations emerged against him, including psychological and spiritual manipulation of religious women, many began to ask whether his art should remain in spaces designed to console and uplift the faithful. Pope Leo's decision to remove these works was not only a response to public outcry, it was an affirmation that sacred space must reflect sacred values. This action followed years of silence, hesitation, and unresolved questions surrounding Rupnik's influence. For survivors, this removal is a gesture of justice. For the faithful, it is a sign that change is possible, even within ancient institutions. But this also raises another question: what happens now? Replacing sacred art is no small task. These mosaics are not posters that can simply be taken down. They are embedded into the walls of basilicas, commissioned years in advance, and often viewed as part of the architectural and liturgical identity of the space. Removing them is not just physical, it is theological. It marks a turning point in how the Church understands the relationship between beauty and truth. In the coming months, the Vatican and other institutions will begin the process of commissioning new artworks. This will likely involve selecting artists whose lives and spiritual witness align with the mission of the Church. More than ever, there is a renewed call for integrity, not just in doctrine, but in artistic expression. We can expect that some of the new commissions will come from lesser-known artists, local communities, and voices previously overlooked. This could be an opportunity to reimagine sacred art, not as a product of fame or recognition, but as a fruit of humility and prayer. In this way, the Church has the chance to reclaim beauty as something that uplifts not only the eye, but also the soul. There is precedent for this kind of renewal. In the wake of past crises, the Church has often turned to sacred art to reflect repentance and rebirth. After the iconoclastic controversies of the early Church, art returned not just as decoration, but as dogma and color. After the Council of Trent, new guidelines ensured that art would align with doctrine and lead the faithful to holiness. Today, we find ourselves in a similar moment, called to purify not only institutions, but also the images that fill them. This is not about condemnation. It is about discernment, about making space for art that reflects both the glory of God and the dignity of His people. And it is about honoring the pain of those who were wounded, not by images, but by the man behind them. Rupnik's case has reminded the Church that holiness cannot be faked through aesthetics. No matter how skillful the mosaic, no matter how inspiring the colors, the source matters. What flows from a heart misaligned with Christ cannot be called sacred, no matter how beautiful it looks. In many ways, this removal is not an ending, but a beginning. A chance for the Church to recommit itself to the values it proclaims. A chance to ask, who do we allow to shape the spiritual imagination of the faithful? And what does it mean to be a true artist of the sacred? As new works begin to emerge and fill these now vacant spaces, each one will carry its own meaning, not just in design, but in origin. The hope is that these works will be born from prayer, from humility, and from a deep love for Christ and His Church. That they will tell a different story, one not stained by scandal, but illuminated by grace. The process will take time. Walls must be prepared. Designs must be discerned. But the shift has begun. What was once hidden behind silence is now being addressed with action. The Church is not only removing images, it is restoring credibility, and in doing so, it is reminding the world that beauty without truth is incomplete. For many Catholics, these recent steps represent more than just change, they represent hope. Hope that the Church can face its failures, hope that healing is possible, and hope that the sacred spaces we enter to pray will once again be filled with art that speaks of light, not shadows. As this story continues to unfold, one thing remains clear. Sacred art must be more than technically excellent. It must be born from holiness. Because in the end, every mosaic is not just a reflection of the artist, it is a reflection of the Church itself. The decision by Pope Leo XIV to remove the works of Marko Rupnik was not made in isolation. It followed months, if not years, of growing concern within the Church about how sacred spaces are used and what message they send to the faithful. To understand this move, one must look beyond the surface. Pope Leo is seen by many as a shepherd who emphasizes truth spoken with clarity and courage. From the very first days of his pontificate, his tone has been firm but pastoral, focused on restoring trust, healing wounds, and drawing the Church back to its spiritual foundations. His removal of Rupnik's artwork fits into that broader vision. There were practical reasons, of course. Rupnik had been expelled from the Jesuit order and was no longer in communion with the Church's priesthood. He was facing serious and credible accusations from multiple individuals. To keep his artwork prominently displayed, especially in official Vatican platforms, risked undermining the Church's credibility, particularly in the eyes of survivors and those already struggling with disillusionment. But Pope Leo's action may also reflect something deeper. In recent years, the Church has wrestled with how to address its past failings, especially in the handling of abuse cases. While protocols and safeguarding measures have been strengthened, many Catholics have continued to ask for more visible signs of change, signs that accountability is not just a policy, but a principle. Removing Rupnik's art may be one of those signs. By taking down these works, Pope Leo is not erasing history, he is acknowledging it. He is affirming that sacred places must not glorify those whose lives stand in contradiction to the gospel. He is showing that the wounds of victims are not to be ignored or hidden under tiles and tesserae. They must be seen, respected, and ultimately healed. There is also the matter of symbolism. Art in the Catholic imagination is never neutral. It shapes the environment of worship. It speaks when words fall short. For a pope who appears to place deep value on authentic witness, allowing compromised works to remain in holy places would send the wrong message. It would risk confusing reverence with reputation, beauty with complicity. Pope Leo may also be thinking about the future, about what kind of church he will hand down to the next generation. One where accountability is no longer delayed. One where the art that surrounds the Eucharist reflects not just divine glory, but also human dignity. In removing Rupnik's images, he may be making space, physically and spiritually, for something new to take root. That kind of leadership is not without cost. It disrupts long-standing practices. It forces institutions to confront their own hesitations, and it may draw criticism from those who prefer the comfort of silence. But history tends to remember those who act with integrity, especially when that integrity is tested. Pope Leo's decision may also be part of a broader reform. A quiet but firm recentering of the Church's priorities, fidelity to truth, clarity of mission, and protection of the vulnerable. In this context, art is not being discarded, it is being purified. It is being called back to its original purpose, to glorify God, not man. As this papacy unfolds, decisions like these are likely to set the tone, not only for how the Church addresses the past, but for how it will walk forward, step by step, toward renewal. And in that walk, every mosaic removed is not simply a loss. It is an invitation to rebuild, not just with stone and gold, but with humility, justice, and grace. In the end, the removal of Marko Rupnik's art is not simply about correcting past mistakes, it represents a broader and more profound act of spiritual discernment. For centuries, the Church has looked to sacred art as a form of catechesis and worship. In the early days of Christianity, when few could read or write, it was the stained glass, icons, and frescoes that taught the stories of salvation. These visual expressions were never neutral. They were carefully placed, deliberately chosen, and designed to elevate the soul. So when the Church begins removing artwork, not due to damage or age, but because of the actions of its creator, it is not a gesture of censorship. It is a gesture of protection, of purification, of fidelity to the truth that sacred spaces should reflect not only the beauty of divine mysteries, but also the moral clarity expected of those who contribute to them. Pope Leo XIV's decision is not an isolated event. It is part of a growing awareness within the Church that the spiritual life of the community must be protected from anything that contradicts its core teachings. Art can inspire, but it can also confuse. And when the person behind the art is tied to abuse, manipulation, or defiance of authority, the very message of that art becomes compromised. It is not enough to separate the artist from the work. Not in sacred spaces, not in places where people come to encounter God, to seek healing, to find peace. For those who have suffered abuse within the Church, seeing the work of an accused figure in a chapel or on a Vatican website is not just a visual reminder, it's a wound reopened. That is why this moment matters. By choosing to remove Rupnik's mosaics and digital artwork, Pope Leo XIV is affirming a simple but powerful truth. There can be no holiness without accountability, and there can be no renewal unless the Church is willing to take bold, uncomfortable steps to protect the sacred from being tainted by scandal. But this decision also opens a door to renewal. New artworks will take the place of those removed. These will not be rushed or superficial replacements. They will be opportunities for the Church to lift up voices and talents that embody the spirit of the gospel. Artists who understand that sacred art is not about fame, but about fidelity. Not about recognition, but about reverence. In the coming years, these new creations may come from unknown names, from monasteries, or from communities often overlooked. Their works will carry the weight of this moment, but also the promise of something better. And for the faithful, these changes offer a chance to look more deeply at what sacred art truly is. It's not about prestige. It's not about preservation for its own sake. It is about helping souls draw nearer to the mysteries of God. When that is the goal, even the most modest work can become something magnificent. The Church has faced turning points before. After the Reformation, after the Council of Trent, after the upheavals of the 20th century, each time, it found a way to recover what had been lost and to recommit itself to what is essential. This may be one of those moments, a quiet, symbolic shift that signals a deeper transformation. And it is happening under the leadership of a pope who, in just a short time, has shown a willingness to speak plainly, act swiftly, and prioritize integrity over image. Pope Leo's pontificate is still in its early days, but his decision to address the issue of Rupnik's legacy with clarity and resolve has set a tone that says healing comes before heritage, that silence is no longer acceptable, and that sacred art must serve the truth, or it risks betraying it. To many outside the Church, this may seem like a small story, some mosaics removed, some websites changed. But to those who understand the power of symbols in Catholic tradition, this is a clear signal. The Church is listening, the Church is learning, and the Church is moving forward. There is still much work to be done. There are still wounds that need healing, systems that need reform, and voices that deserve to be heard. But change always begins somewhere, and sometimes it begins with a single act of removal so that something more faithful can be rebuilt in its place. In the end, the legacy of this moment may not be the removal of art, but the restoration of credibility, the restoration of a Church that does not settle for appearances, but seeks authenticity, a Church that remembers that the most beautiful mosaic is not made of stone and glass, but of truth, humility, and the courage to do what is right. Because in the house of God, every wall tells a story, and what the Church chooses to place on those walls must reflect the faith, the hope, and the justice it proclaims. And in that, there is reason to hope.